Microsoft, it's building the agent OS. Google, it's the AI dev layer. OpenAI wants to own AI interfaces, and Anthropic is delivering the agent brain. Is that right? Do you see it that way as well? Welcome to Generation AI, the podcast where we demystify artificial intelligence in higher education and beyond. Me, I'm JC Bonilla.
And everybody, I'm Ardis Kadiu. My head is spinning from all of the things that have happened this week in AI. JC, what a week. It's been crazy.
I mean, we thought about what this is called, right? So this is like a Frontiers Lab Awakening. So just can you give us a teaser of what's going to happen in the next half hour or so? So much to talk about.
It has been incredible. So today's show is all about kind of this news blitz, right? From Microsoft Build, Google I/O, Johnny Ive with OpenAI, Anthropic. And literally just this week, Microsoft, moving into with their Microsoft Build conference, where big changes that are happening and how they're thinking about AI and agents. Google doubles down on AI on the application layer and then kind of the use cases. We're going to talk a little bit about OpenAI and kind of their move into potentially what could be hardware with Johnny Ive joining the team. And if you don't know what Johnny Ive is, then go look it up. You're probably carrying one of his.
I was going to say, most likely you have a Johnny Ive in your pocket, right? Because there's a correlation of you having an iPhone if you listen to us. But yeah.
That's right. And of course, like we couldn't wrap this up with Anthropic as well, launching one of the most powerful coding models, Claude 4, out there. So lots have been happening. We can spend hours and hours on diving into each one of these different areas, but we're going to try to synthesize this and essentially bring it up a little bit a higher level and see what are the different patterns that are emerging, what are the things that you should be paying attention to, and what are some of the things that you should go take a look at in order to kind of keep up and kind of bring it into your own workflows or even start thinking about it.
All right, let's dive in, Ardis. Our first debrief and signals from events to showcases and the signals extraction. What this means is with Microsoft Build 2025. This is a users conference or their developers conference, and it's always a gigantic event. It happens every year. And the tonality here is Windows is now agent first, following many organizations and they claim that we are AI native or AI first. By the way, credit to you, my friend. You did this about 9 months ago. So I think that it's been a great strategic intent claim. And the orchestration of how that's demonstrated is around Windows Recall, Copilot Studio, Team Copilot, and multiple things. So I'll start with this. Can you summarize from your point of view, like, what is this developer conference? Who comes to these things? And like, why is this important for an organization like Microsoft to say, now I'm agent first?
Yeah, this is really important because these developer conferences is where the technology companies or the platform companies really announce the tooling and kind of their vision and what they're building.
Right.
And because it's a developer conference, they need to announce that to developers first so developers can actually start building applications on top of these and start incorporating into the different vertical specific workflows. And so it's super important for Microsoft as a platform company to start kind of putting all of these capabilities and this vision into play, platform both on Windows, on the operating system, but also on the cloud as well with their Azure and their infrastructure components as well. And Microsoft has traditionally been a tools company as well, right? They put a lot of tools out there. They bought GitHub a couple of years ago, so they announced a whole lot of stuff around that. So they're really into the tooling.
To your point, I just want everybody to remember that as a developers conference, if these ideas land, right, in a developer, an organization starts building against these infrastructure showcases, what happens is it accelerates the consumer experience on all these AI things. In other words, this showcase is so important to us consumers because a developer is the one who's going to grab these Copilot or Windows Recall things and not only see it on a Microsoft environment, but the whole ecosystem of technology that works around against Microsoft. So, Ardis, I was just wondering if you can start giving us, from your point of view, a few of these key points. I heard a ton about Windows Recall, which it's actually a vibe from. I can recall Windows Recall from last year. We keep on hearing Copilot. I keep on hearing Copilot. I mean, Copilot's been around, and then other things, but just from the get-go, like, so how is this different? It sounds like Copilot and Recall has been around. So what was the big deal here?
Yeah, so at the core of Microsoft's announcements is really this transformation of Windows into what they're calling a really robust platform for AI agents. So we're not like AI agents were at the core of everything that Microsoft has announced, and really Windows AI Foundry emerges as this kind of toolkit, which again, replacing previously what they announced on Copilot runtime and so on and so forth. So I'm not going to go into too much of these details, but essentially, Windows AI Foundry gives now folks the ability to Windows to be exposed as a platform for building agents that can kind of collaborate together. The agent centric approach really enables Microsoft and kind of brings them into this multi-agent orchestration that we've been talking about. So they're building the tooling and they're building the platform where people can now build agents on top, and not only can they live in the cloud, these agents, but they can live in your local environment and your Windows as well. So having this systems and having the foundation for agents to collaborate and to bring them together really moves that thing forward. And the part that was really interesting that Microsoft announced was obviously Copilot Studio that brings all these pieces together so you can build agents. But underpinning all the collaboration in this ecosystem is MCP, was the Model Context Protocol. So they essentially adopted, and we talked about that during our
Yeah.
2 episodes ago, and what that is. So now you're seeing a platform company saying, hey, we're adopting this protocol and we're going to build this multi-agent infrastructure so you can start building things for us, or that people can start building things. Now imagine where Windows or your operating system exposes all of its capabilities to your personal AI agent or Copilot, right? Or to your personal AI chatbot. So think about using ChatGPT or Claude or whatever you have, and now they can reach out and do anything within Windows. And what you mentioned before, JC, around a recall, we've talked before where data and context and memory is super important for these agents. So there is really no better way to understand the data and your personalization and kind of what you do than your operating system, because it captures everything about you. So this idea of recall and compressing memory and bringing memory together so it can be used by agents and exposed to agents is amazing, right? And that's kind of the unlock here that they're going for. So imagine now where you have the ability to build or to ask with ChatGPT or Claude or whatever chatbot they use. You can ask your operating system, hey, tell me about that, that thing I was working on 3 days ago. Like you can basically reach out and see exactly in time what you're working on. You have access to your files and everything else, and these agents Microsoft exposes all of that through MCP, which is pretty cool.
Yeah, so I think I'm hearing two things. Number one, apparently Satya Nadella, the CEO of Microsoft, listened to our podcast episode 3 weeks ago and changed everything to be ICP ready, right? So number one,
MCP, yes, that's right.
MCP, right? And the second thing, if you are Microsoft campus, right? If you are Microsoft organization, you should start expecting that through the lens of recall, aka these old context and memory upgrades that Frontier Labs have given to us. AI not only knows what you're doing, but it kind of knows what you've done. And as such, in the presence of assistants and agents, you bring all the context into your personalization, automation, and amplification work. Really, really exciting, because many times when we prompt or we call these assistants, the context and the memory it's removed or absent. You have to reping it in your prompt or whatever. And that's the big difference between hyper personalization, as we call it, an element, a segment of one, and bringing all that context. So it's exciting that Microsoft is there, and if you're a Microsoft campus, you should be seeing that very, very soon in your day-to-day productive life.
Yeah, that was interesting. One something that you can take a look at. I don't know how important it's going to be. Is what they called NL Web, this new natural language web, and essentially it can turn any website into underneath it uses MCP, but it can turn any website into a conversational interface to your website. So essentially, it can kind of pull all the data, all of the metadata, and things like that, and you can turn your website into a data source for agents as well, which is really, really interesting, right? So they announced that, and so that's something to keep an eye on. They, perhaps if you're somebody who's building institutional website and you start thinking about that, it's like how do you bubble up your programs to this AI chatbots, and how do you make your website as an interface for AI agents to interact with your website or your web content? That's an area you can pay attention to.
Super important, because remember, in terms of hallucinations and frontier models not giving us the output that we want, it's all a function of grounding, and the context in which you ground many times is already on websites and catalogs. So this idea, it's super important. So Microsoft, we know, not a literally producer of frontier models, right? But bringing that frontier models onto applications and whatnot. Google, with Google I/O, right? We could say that the theme that happened at the kind of middle of May, right, in the Google I/O developer conference is very similar. Google showcasing to developers what they're working on. But now what we see is Google as a frontier lab developing LLMs, right? And probably the father, as we know, of all these exciting generative AI work. They just put reasoning at its core. Big drops on LLMs, big drops in multimodal aspects, and similar to Microsoft, big showcase in how there's family Gemini goes basically context aware across the workspace. So the Google family that we know from mail, documents, and things of that sort. So let's do it the same way. Why is it important? What's the difference between being a developer showcasing to the Google conferences to the Microsoft for everybody who doesn't know these things from your point of view?
Yeah. So Microsoft, like I said, it's a tools builder and they're a platform company, but they don't do any of their own AI models. So basically, they host and they give access to everybody else's.
They borrow, or they bought, right?
Right.
OpenAI and
Yeah,
whatnot.
exactly. Whereas Google, they have their own Gemini models and they're kind of a frontier lab. So we put Google in the frontier lab with AI. And as part of that, in the past, they have been really kind of producing models. And one of the key things that kind of piqued my interest is that from last year to this year, their Gemini models, in terms of usage and adoption, have generated 50 times the amount of tokens. So people are using it 50 times more than last year from this year. So, which is an incredible, kind of acceleration on how Google was started from behind, but they're catching up, and they're leveraging their infrastructure, or they're leveraging their ecosystem in order to do that. So it really signaled in Google I/O this intent to deeply integrate and enhance AI across all its vast products and ecosystem. But they particularly focused on empowering developers and really on the user experience, right? So they focused a lot on that. And they introduced these huge advancements in Gemini, and then also kind of changes. Perhaps the biggest announcement, which was something that we anticipated, but was, their search experience, right? Which is their bread and butter. But now they announced AI search, or AI mode rather, with Google search, which is going to roll out. So I want to focus on a couple of those different things in here. And perhaps we can talk a little bit more about AI mode in Google search and kind of what it means for SEO. What does it mean for a lot of the folks that are relying on Google to kind of drive their traffic? We've had this discussion before, but let's go through and kind of throw out the product announcements and the models, and then we can kind of end it on with AI mode and that specifically. Sounds okay?
100%. Just as we go through this, keep in mind the following, right? As Ardis mentioned, what we have is an organization that actually does models, but through its history has not been the basically the first to showcase, but they come second or third, and then over time they dominate. They were not the first in search, right? We had Google, Yahoo's, and AltaVista's dominating that space, and they take over multiple times in terms of word processing and spreadsheets and all that kind of supporting the workspace to applications. Now, many of us just only use, Gmails and Google Docs and Google Spreadsheets. So a very similar play is happening through the aspect of OpenAI has been dominating on monthly user activations, but what we start seeing is they're catching up. And it's a really interesting story because, to your last point, is their ability to start saying how this goes into search, how this goes into productivity in the entire ecosystem that they have. So I just wanted to highlight that is not their first rodeo, as in being 2 or 3 and catching up and maybe ending up dominating, being the dominant technology here. So we'll see how it plays out. All right.
Yeah, I mean, Google I/O is perhaps the most exciting kind of. There's just so much in there, JC. There's just so much. So let's go through all of these, right? So overall, they introduced they kind of moved the Gemini model. So they introduced Gemini 2.0 flat, 2.5 Flash. It's moving forward. Gemini 2.5 Pro with deep thinking mode is now available. And, as part of that, they introduced what they called, now you can use them in the Gemini app, right? And Gemini 2.5 Pro, it's with deep thinking, it pushes this idea of thinking models even further, right? And Google is positioning Gemini as a universal AI assistant, right? Capable of understanding context, taking actions across devices, and it's not connecting it throughout. So along with those flagship models, they also do open source as well. So they introduced and highlighted Gemma 3N, which is for low memory usage, like fast responses for on device, and it's multimodal as well.
By the way, Ardis, I just wanted to say congratulations, Google, for landing the naming convention. One of the important things that they've as you know, many of us were trying to keep up with Gemini, but the numbering convention had us thrown, and the ability to look at Flash and Pro in the versions of Lite or not for the paid services are, as simple as it sounds, are really, really good, important in terms of product adoption. So just wanted to throw that out there.
Yeah. No, that's very exciting, I think. So, kind of continuing on that, one of the things that perhaps from an educational perspective, Google has had these models called LearnLM. This family, it's family of fine-tuned models specifically designed for learning, right? And it's now infused into the Gemini 2.5 and really kind of positioning Gemini as a leading AI model for education, where LearnLM, kind of outperforms a lot of alternative models on learning science principles, and it's preferred by educators, meaning that it can kind of really push forward this advanced STAM reasoning, multimodal reasoning, and they kind of think about it as like can do like custom quiz creation features. It can provide interactive feedback, hints, explanations, summaries, strengths and weaknesses. So it's like if you think about a model that can build educational content and around STEM and so on and so forth, there's a lot of nuances around that. So that's an area where if we have any educators listening, that's an area we might focus on. The biggest capabilities, though, Google unveiled this amazing suite of powerful AI tools, and a lot of them were really powered by this advanced model. So they introduced VO3, and this is perhaps one of the most exciting announcements that they had as a creator. And I believe Jeff Bezos said this will kill Hollywood. So VO3 is an AI video generation model which now can produce audio as well with the video. So it can produce synchronized audio and video. It can include dialogue. It synchronizes with the video content. JC, when I say it is amazing at the results, I can't believe how this is now the Sora moment, I would say, for Google or for video, but now with audio being synchronized and being produced at the same time. So that is available in Gemini 2.5. It's as part of the chatbot. However, you have, as part of these, Google also announced that they're selling Gemini. There's a ultra version of Gemini that you can buy for $250 a month, right? And that's how they're monetizing all of these amazing new advanced models.
Have you seen how these got packaged? So, and then going back to my prior comment in terms of the clarity and naming convention. So there's the Gemini package, but there's within Google, we have DeepMind, and within DeepMind, there's like the drop of VO3, but there's this thing called Flow. Right? And Flow seems to be their front end component in the studio for you to interact with these vision and video models, right? So have you seen it in Flow? Have you had the opportunity to create something on their labs?
Yeah, so VO3 is the model, right? And you can have it in Gemini. And also they introduced Image Gen 4, which is, think about this as like DALL-E or Chat or Midjourney. This is the image models. Amazing image model that does text and does a lot of different things. So both of these two models are now can be embedded into Google announcing a whole bunch of these creative tools. One of them is Flow. And what Flow, it's an AI-powered filmmaking tool that allows users to really kind of create scenes. You can create characters, and you can create a lot of movie assets from natural language prompts where you can use VO3 and you can say, okay, I'm introducing a character, I'm introducing multiple characters or images. You can tell it to create a video about these characters, and then, you can add additional scenes to it, and Flow understands the prior scenes as well, and you can kind of stitch things together. So there's character continuity, there is a speech in there, there is a lot of different things. So Flow, think about it as an editor, as a video editor, but it generates the video rather than you stitching it together, right? You can just tell the story, and you can put, reference images in there. And I got to use it for literally like 5 minutes. It's one of my weekend projects, and perhaps this is an area where we can come back and kind of explore it a little bit more.
100%. So more to come on the utilization of text to video using these models. So keep in mind, if you wanted to experiment a tad in making a weekend project, you can reach these in Flow in the in the DeepMind section on Google.
Well, so DeepMind is the lab, right? Everything is under DeepMind AI. Just want to make sure that we're like,
sure. My point is, if you search for the Gemini kind of list, you're not gonna see V3, right? So anyway.
Yeah. So you have to have, in order to use some of these tools, now they're packaged with Gemini Ultra. So when you use Gemini Ultra, you have these tools available to you as well. The last one I want to mention around tools that they introduced is perhaps an extension to one of our favorite tools, which is Notebook LM. And if you're not familiar with Notebook LM, one of the features that they have in there is the notion to create what are called AI overviews, right? Or AI text, like this podcast. You can create text podcast. Well, now they showcased and they introduced video overviews. So it will take your concepts and it will create actual videos out of that, right? You'll create learning and explanation videos for those concepts going back and forth. You'll pull quotes, you'll create, background video generated by VO3. So you can see how Google is powering all of their tools now with these advancements in their models that they're creating. But the killer apps are going to win the day, not necessarily the best and most powerful models, right? And because of Google's ability to have this different types of models, now they can include them into products. And that's perhaps the main thing to take out of this, is that now Google is all about how do you bring the use cases to the end users rather than just building powerful models underneath. And that's kind of the game here. Should we move on to the main topic around Google and perhaps, which is AI mode? I mean, this is the part that perhaps is going to affect our industry the most around marketing and
I
how
thought you were.
we think about it.
I thought we already hit the main topic, but yes, keep on building up, my friend.
Yeah. So if you're not familiar, you've been having Google AI overviews on your search for quite a while. We've talked about how this is drastically reducing the traffic that are going to your organic sites. SEO is kind of flipped on its head. And one of the things that obviously we've seen a pattern, or we've seen kind of an expansion or an acceleration of behavior towards chatbots as your main way to interact and get information rather than going to Google, where Google needed to address that as well. So what they did is they introduced AI mode for search. And what this means is that rather than you now getting those blue links, you're actually going to get, with AI mode, you're going to get these structured answers. You're certainly going to have links in there. You're going to have citations. You can have charts. You're going to have in-depth analysis and breakdowns. And really, the idea is that it's going to enhance your search capabilities. In addition to that, they also, on your mobile apps, because you can have it in Gemini as well, they're now can use video, or they can use images to do this search capabilities as well. So you can have a video, you can search with video, you can search with images. So it's kind of putting all of those pieces together, for Google into this one project. But it means a lot to our behavior today on search.
Is this a perplexity killer?
Well, so search is a big, topic right now. So we've seen ChatGPT search,
Grab it,
right?
yeah. Yep.
We've seen Perplexity. We've seen every chatbot incorporating a search component to it. So now all your information is grounded. But I think Google has a lot of its data and the kind of connections that they have and the data layer that they have around search is something that they can leverage really, really quickly. Is it going to be a perplexity killer? Maybe. Is the market going to get bigger and bigger? Yes, for sure. So the answer is absolutely. They're going to compete. Like, I'm sure Perplexity provides very different value propositions, and what they're building on top of their search is a little bit different, right?
And for those of you who do not know, Perplexity, remember, is one of our favorite search applications out there. Probably one of the things that they have going on for them. They don't adhere to one LLM in Frontier Labs, so they're not Gemini only or OpenAI. So they do whatever they need to do to give us users their best consumer experience. A lot of the use cases I've been seeing on Perplexity is the travel aspect in search. And I also hear a lot of the investment is going to be on adding agents towards booking and whatnot. So we'll see how that plays out. But as it relates to search, remember that a Google of the world dominates because its ability to monetize its grab that it has on all of us on search, and have a very exciting and practical advertising model behind it that monetizes our search with this AI component, right? I think it just basically gives the response to all these spillage that has happened over the past months, that I am not using Google anymore as my search engine. I was using multiple things, as you mentioned, and now they're saying, hey, come back and I'm going to give you that match experience. So good for them, because they are, again, on catch-up mode and in a way reacting the way I would expect them to.
GC, I do have to say, in terms of search, I have switched my behavior quite a bit. Yes, I'm using Perplexity for certain things, but I now do a lot of deep research, and that's the starting point for a lot of my searches. So when I'm trying to kind of accomplish a task nowadays, it's more around, like, I want to understand this topic, or I want to understand, what's the grounding foundation for these questions that I have, or these problems that I have. And rather than me going to Google and searching specific queries or specific, it's like, how do you do this? Or how do you, like, I'm actually doing a deep research. I'm finding myself do that more and more. And then that takes a few minutes, but then it comes back with really great foundational content. Then I can start building, and I'm like, oh, okay, I probably missed this in my question. I probably missed that. And that's the starting point. So that's the behavior that I'm seeing myself using more and more, rather than just going to Google and searching. For example, even an error message, or perhaps even a implementation detail. It's like, well, does this library have this? It's like, no, 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 this capability. I'm switching my behavior to say, can you actually research what's the best practices for this? What are people using? And does this library, or has anybody implemented this with this library or that library? So now it's bringing all of the, relevant information around that particular problem, and then also providing context specifically for the narrow error or question that I have for that particular library. And I can continue now to say, oh, I understand this, people are solving this problem in these different ways, rather than the narrow search that I can do specifically for that one question that I have. So I don't know if it's better or not, but I'm finding myself using that pattern more and more.
I don't disagree with the behavior change. I also see myself doing that. The one distinction is in the keyword narrow versus deep search, right? There's this researchy projects that I have in mind, and I want to reach kind of information saturation. So I want all. That's your point. And then it has an iterative component that now that I have all this information, right, I will benefit from generative AI for summarization. So it kind of gives me that sea of information to how I need to present it and how I go about it. So that's very deep, and it's a much higher quality. But to the point of narrow search, I need to know the name of the CIO. I need to know this park. The point of, I just want the answer, and I don't need all the information saturation. Do you find yourself switching, or are you still going to Google type of searches? How are you doing your narrow search?
For the narrow stuff, I'm going to Google. Yes.
Yeah. That's interesting, because I would tell you that in terms of consumer behavior and the shopping actions, how much of that deep research takes us there versus the narrow, I'm looking for a restaurant, and then I want to know, and then I'm gonna, I don't know, do the dash door thing, and then also like the 3 cents in that transaction go to Google, right? Because dash door still uses the buying algorithm. So I don't know. All right, this is a lovely conversation, because what has happened is as we are giving you the state of the art, driven by events, conferences, developers attending and hearing from these tech giants what they're working on. What we have here is a love story. So play the music and imagine this visual of Sam Altman, CEO of OpenAI, with Johnny Ive, the basically creative partner in crime of Steve Jobs, who is responsible for basically these impact that Apple has had in our lives as consumers, right? So, and I'm going to paint this picture and pass it to you, because it's a blog called Sammy and Johnny. And it really, when you look at it, it's like, oh my gosh, these two gentlemen got married. How lovely. And then you'll start reading like, oh my gosh, these two are painting the next frontier on the Frontier Labs, which Ardis is not software. So can we go from romantic, professional, business marriage to what does this mean in terms of physicality and AI?
So if for those of you who are not familiar, I'll just give you a little bit of a timeline. About 5 years ago, Johnny Ive moved on from Apple, and then he opened his own design or product design firm called
Love Form.
That's right. And then he had collaborations with a lot of different product companies, including, like Ferrari, for example, where he did, he worked with them. So essentially they were a firm that did, design firm and research firm, and they worked with consulting firm, right? So they worked with different brands to do that. A couple of years ago, 2 years ago, OpenAI and Sam Altman, like they approached them and said, "Hey, we want to work on some product stuff together." And 2 years ago, they spun out a company, a subsidiary or a separate company called IO, right? And a part of that was starting to build devices, what AI first devices could look like. We've seen a lot of these devices from other companies like the Pin or Rabbit and so on and so forth. They have not really done anything. I mean, Meta Glasses is probably the best AI device that's on the market today. But this idea of building hardware and how does AI fit into the world started a couple of years ago. So that journey. So what's happened is that OpenAI has bought IO for 6.5 billion acquisition of this startup. Prior to that, they only had 20% of that company, so they had 20% of it. So, anyways, I'm giving you the history here, but essentially, what this means is that Johnny Ive is now in charge of the devices and physical design at OpenAI, but also in charge of product design and a few other things as well. And it means that the guy who brought us the iPhone, the iPad design, the iPod, and also, if you remember the original Macs, the multicolor Macs, JC, the translucent, that was Johnny Ive. So that design tradition that he brought at Apple, introducing all these products, is now in the DNA of OpenAI. And one of the things that Sam Altman mentioned, kind of as part of the video introducing this, was interesting. Like he said, hey, I've had the chance to kind of play around with some of these, like one of the devices that they're building, this AI first device, and it is an incredible, and it's nothing like I've seen before. So we're going to see over the next however long the deployment of AI into the physical world with this AI first devices, and Johnny Ive being part of the executive team and leading design at OpenAI. I would not bet against them right now.
Yeah, so two things I want to mention in historical journey here, PhD vibes, artists, but there's a whole body of work that is called hedonic technology, right? That technologies become of pleasure as opposed to productive, and then now we see the phone as an artifact that I've used and entertain myself, and I can spend 2 hours or 5 hours just scrolling in a TikTok crawl, right? Or I can do photos, I can do videos, right? And that's how technology had that evolution. Why do I say that and how is this relevant? For us to make the leap of productivity, I have a phone that to pick up and call my mom or my friends to a phone that being entertainment. It needed designers to crack the code of interactability, usability, and experience. And this is what happens here, right? The iPhone wouldn't be what it is unless we learn how to do the two fingers zoom in, zoom out, right? Or how we think about the rotating, like when you use, I'm doing my finger up and down and you see that kind of rotating wheel, like all those little things are so important, and they crack the code for us to create these addictive patterns on the utilization of this technology. Fast forward to I think this year, right? You and I spoke a lot about this once chart that it was called the evolution of AI from perception to generative AI to agentic to physical AI. And this is basically how it would happen. That power of the minds, someone creating the future as it is today and someone thinking how the future will look like. And it comes together and it gives us these artifacts that now make me work and behave differently through the lens of AI. I don't know how I will interact with, an AI power phone specifically, but someone like Johnny Ives does make that future and then brings it out to us. And the last thing that I want everybody to remember, the visual that I always try to keep in mind on how this looks like. It's in the Minority Report movie with Tom Cruise of how he interacted with visuals and try to look at the future right from the mind of these kind of sentient individuals. Do you know that movie? Today we have that world through screens, but it was someone like Steven Spielberg to kind of paint that picture narrative. So that's basically what is happening.
You're saying that science fiction, like technology mimics science fiction. So like science fiction is first and then we kind of build towards it. I mean, that's a pattern that we've seen, but in this case, like the idea, the idea is, or what they're discussing is basically what they're calling ambient intelligence, right? It's these devices that are, an extension of your physical being, and they're providing you intelligence in the background. They're listening, they're absorbing information, they're processing information, and then at the right moment, at the right contextual moment, they're kind of telling you and providing you that feedback. So that's kind of this third wave of technology or device, the third device perhaps, right? So you have your phone, you have your desktop, and then the ambient technology device that you can kind of carry with you. Maybe Apple Watch could have been that for Apple, but that vision hasn't been realized there still. So maybe Johnny, I don't know, like I'm waiting for the AI phone or AI whatever.
I think that's the punchline on this section, right? As it relates to OpenAI, we should expect that the next product is not a GPT-6 or 5 or 7.
Right.
It may be the iPod or the iPhone version of that. So, and that is what physical AI will look like. Not only is exciting, but I cannot wait to see what they think of that and bring the future to us today. We have one more. Let's do it really quickly. But this is not on the vibe of a conference. And I've been working towards this and I bring all the people together. It feels like a little bit of a catching up type of thing. But in a blog yesterday, right, what we learned is that Anthropic has Claude 4. Huge, probably taking the price of the best LLM today. We'll see how long they hold that. But do you want to give us the why it matters and why they thought, they needed to make this announcement today or yesterday?
They actually, it's interesting. I didn't realize it, but it was actually a code with Claude. It was their developer conference. So
There
wow.
was?
So yeah, which is interesting. So everybody just fit up their developer conferences in 1 week, which is amazing, right?
Huh.
But that's where they introduced it. So they introduced
Note to self: never do a user conference at Element on the last week of May. Note to
the
self.
last week of May. Yeah, it's crazy. It's like, hey, here's all this technology that you can spend your whole summer where you're supposed to be on vacation, starting to build products, so you can launch it in the fall for every other company, right? But anyways, Claude 3.7 Sonnet was one of the best coding models out there. It was used for a lot of different developers. Claude 4, they introduced Claude 4, which is on both Opus and Sonnet models during this conference. And the strong emphasis, it's really advanced reasoning and coding proficiency, right? And kind of this unique learning mode tailored for education as well. Claude 4 positions itself as one of the most capable coding models, right? It kind of lost that a little bit, but now it's even better than what we saw from OpenAI Codex model that was introduced around coding, and even Gemini 2.5. But essentially, they have made this leap in coding capabilities, and as part of that, also agent use is kind of at the core of what they announced as well. So the deep reasoning, so it does reasoning, it does better at coding, it can kind of think longer, it can provide better agentic workflows as part of it as well.
Nice. So, Ardis, what else can we say about MCP? We've been talking about model context protocol. Remember, is the universal format. We have a whole episode on it, and it's about how a tool can use, the agent memory, and it's in a way interoperable. But at the conference, double down on MCP. Anything else that you would like to highlight on things MCP? Our claim weeks ago is that this is going to be a technology and trend to watch. So what do we have there?
Well, so all four of these, like areas we talked about, Microsoft MCP is they're exposing these agent capabilities for Windows, for everything, and MCP is one of the protocols that they're using as part of that, doubling down. We talked about Google; they're also supporting MCP. We're talking about OpenAI. We actually didn't talk about that, but they did some advancements on their API and a few things. And one of the things that they introduced is the ability for you to just say, hey, register an MCP server, and then you can use their API to essentially call these external tools through it, which is great. And then Anthropic just did exactly the same thing. So they are like, hey, we're going to expand our APIs. So now rather than you just having access to our tools internally, you can kind of use MCP to connect to other things as well. So they're trying to become the platform that developers are building, and they're connecting the whole ecosystem together with MCP, which is really, really exciting. And that's the unlock here, is like you're creating so interfaces to different systems. You're creating essentially the HTTP for agents, right, to communicate with different data sources and different tools as you kind of start building these systems. Very exciting for us here at Element, specifically because we now can plug in and connect to different things as we embed MCP, and we have our agents can reach and do more with other systems, right, without us having to build direct integrations with those systems, which is like the pain and the existence of any, I don't know, any work that we do today. It's all around integrations, and it's like, well, okay, this simplifies that a little bit more.
Well, in the spirit of simplification and summarization, Ardis, let me try to wrap it up with very, very simple summaries. From this debrief that we have had in the catching up, the takeaways are: Microsoft, it's building the Agent OS. Google, it's the AI dev layer. OpenAI wants to own AI interfaces, and Anthropic is delivering the agent brain. Is that right? Do you see it that way as well?
Yes, I think that's a really good one. Each lab is really playing a different game, but essentially they're all working towards the same thing, which is AI systems that live with us, think for us, and work across everything. And agents are the way that these things are getting built with.
Well, I hope you enjoyed today's episode and show. We literally just saved you 3 trips to the different conferences. We summarized them, a ton of money. So this is your agentic version of new travel, which is news commentary. But it's been a good one, and continues to be exciting to see how these frontier labs make our summers more interesting. Now trying to figure out how we use all these things.
And busier for sure.
Indeed. All right, take us home.
All right, everyone. Till next time. Generation AI is part of the Enrollify podcast network. If you like this podcast, chances are you're going to like other Enrollify shows too. Our podcast network is growing weekly, and we've got a wide range of marketing, enrollment, and higher ed technology shows that are jam-packed with stories, ideas, and frameworks, all designed to empower you to be a better higher ed professional. Enrollify is made possible by Element 451, the next generation AI student engagement platform that's helping institutions all over the country create meaningful, personalized, and engaging connections with their prospects and students. Learn more at element451.com.